Acts 7:26 of human beings in physical bodies. In the aorist passive form, the word means to initiate an appearance for public view. That is, to move from a place where one is not seen to a place where one is seen. That's all it means. It does not necessarily mean that what is by nature invisible becomes visible. See, when the expression, he was seen, opthe, is used of God and angels, this is Luke 1:11 and Acts 7:2, who are invisible realities, supposedly, opthe, refers to an invisible entity becoming visible. But since the expression is used of other humans and physical bodies, and since Christ is said to have had a body, the soma, there's no reason in his case to take the expression to refer to anything but a literal physical body. He says that in the footnote 27 on page 155. Well, this is very significant here. He says it means in general to come into view. That's the whole idea. Because you weren't in view before. Continuing on page 156, Geisler notes a resurrection body can be seen with the natural eyes. Now this is interesting. This implies a physicality, of course. But if Jesus could appear suddenly, see, this is one of the arguments, if Jesus could appear suddenly, as well as appear suddenly, then as disappear suddenly, then his ability to appear, this cannot be taken as evidence that the resurrection body was essentially invisible at all. For his ability to disappear suddenly could be used as evidence that it was not essentially immaterial. Suddenness is one of the indications of supernaturalness, not of invisibility. See, the argument is, the scripture says Jesus appeared suddenly, and therefore that's why he was invisible, because then suddenly he appeared. But his essential nature is not invisible, immaterial. It is physical, literal. Very interesting how he puts this. After all, he says, the believer's resurrection body will be a supernatural body also. 1 Corinthians 15:44. Suddenness is a characteristic of miraculous power in general. When Jesus or the apostles performed a supernatural healing, the disease departed immediately, we read. Matthew 8:3, Mark 1:31, John 5:9, Acts 9:18 and 34. So the sudden appearance or disappearance of the resurrection body is an indication of its supernatural ability, not of its immateriality. Oh, that's powerful. That's wonderful. Orson Pratt never put it that well, and he put it very powerfully in his discourses. Sudden appearance or disappearance, then, is not proof of the immaterial, but it's proof of the supernatural. On page 157, Geisler continues, the fact that he appeared repeatedly for 40 days, Acts 1 and 3. See, this is the big chapter, the big scripture that Nibley used in his 40-day lecture series, also on the 40 days of the resurrection of Jesus Christ and the appearance of Jesus Christ. This is where Nibley made the 40-day literature very famous, actually. A lot of it was non-canonical as well. But this fact that he does repeatedly appear for 40 days to more than 500 people, you see, on 12 different occasions, well, this is indisputable evidence that he rose bodily from the dead. These many appearances do not say that the resurrection body was invisible or immaterial. Instead, they show that it was material and immortal. Resurrection appearances are called visions. This is yet another indication, according to some, that we're dealing with immaterial stuff. Why are they called visions? Visions are assumed from our modern day and age to be not quite real, as opposed to literal physical. Well, Geisler says reference to a resurrection appearance as a vision is used to support the immaterial view of the resurrection body, and he really has a very interesting footnote here that I want to share. He says in the footnote, page 34, that Pannenberg argues that the resurrection body was essentially immaterial and could only be seen with the natural eyes if a miracle occurred by which it materialized. Well, according to another gentleman named Harris, he says Jesus' physical body was resurrected, but the resurrected body itself was not one of flesh or material substance. So there's little difference between a miracle of materialization or a miracle of visualization. Both of these views, however, deny the essential materiality and physicality of the resurrection body. Ironically, both views posit some kind of a miracle to do it. That is kind of interesting, isn't it? First, Luke, on page 158, first Luke 24:23 does not say seeing the resurrected Christ was a vision. Interesting. It refers only to seeing the angels at the tomb as a vision. The Gospels never speak of a resurrection appearance of Christ as a vision. This is very interesting. The objects are realities that are spiritually perceived. See the contention that Paul's experience must have been a vision because those with him who did not see Christ is unfounded for several reasons. Paul listed this as a physical appearance of Jesus, along with those received by the other apostles immediately after his resurrection. He says that in 1 Corinthians 15:8. Unlike a vision, this appearance had physical phenomena associated with it, such as sound and light. They heard the sound, they saw the light, so on and so forth. Jesus did appear to unbelievers also, as well. Even his disciples, obviously, were at first unbelieving. You have the story of doubting Thomas, even though Elaine Pagel says this is a literary convention, that Thomas may not originally have been doubting, but he is portrayed that way in the Gospels for polemical and political reasons. That's in her book Beyond Belief. Well, anyway, back to Geisler, page 159. Remember, later Jesus had to chide the two disciples on the road to Emmaus about disbelief in his resurrection. Very interesting. So it's wrong to claim that the resurrected Jesus did not appear to unbelievers. I'm just highlighting some of his main arguments against those who claim the resurrection was not physical. He's saying, oh yes, it absolutely was. Page 160. In submission to the Father's will, John 5:30, he was sovereign over his activities both before and after his resurrection. But this in no way proves that he was essentially invisible and immaterial either before or after his resurrection, though. The idea is Jesus could move through closed doors, therefore he's immaterial. Geisler discusses this in detail. Since the resurrected Christ could appear in a room with closed doors, and this is the famous passage in John 20, verse 19 and 26, it's argued that this proves his body must have been essentially immaterial. But this does not follow for several reasons, actually. The verses simply affirm that he got into the room, even though the doors were locked. Conceivably, he could have used his powers to unlock the door, just as was done to release Peter from prison in Acts 12:10. The second point, Jesus could have done miracles like this in his pre-resurrection physical body if he had chosen to do so. As the Son of God, his miraculous powers were as great before the resurrection as they were afterward, but of course. The third point is before his resurrection, Jesus performed miracles with his body. And of course, these miracles transcended natural laws. You remember, he walked on the water, for instance. But walking on the water did not prove that his pre-resurrection body was invisible or immaterial, however. The fourth argument, though physical, the resurrection body is by its very nature a supernatural body. Well, it should be expected then that it could do supernatural things, such as entering a room with closed doors. Fifth, even if Jesus' resurrection body went through doors, this does not mean that it was not material. Oh, now get this idea. According to modern physics, it is not impossible for a material object to pass through a door. It's only a statistical improbable. Physical objects